Welcome to Rooted Intentionally. I'm Susan Carson, and it's my passion to create safe space for transformational encounters through listening, healing, prayer, and spiritual practices. And in this series, we've been talking about healing our image of God, because I had this thought a while back, this question really that popped into my mind, which was, what if how we see God is how we see everything? And so we've been hosting a series of conversations and spiritual practices around this topic. And today I am super excited to bring to you my new friend, David Moore. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Susan, for reconnecting.
Absolutely. We just got to meet at St. Stephen's University in the master's program there. You're adjunct faculty, and you and LA led our class on race and gender, which wrecked me in all the very best ways, pulled back all sorts of veils, and invited me into a new space. And I'm super grateful for that.
Sounds like something you will be writing about.
I have and will be writing about that. Indeed. Indeed. So I'm going to read your bio real quickly, and then if you have anything you want to add or change, you can do that. The Reverend Dr. David Moore is a pastor of Santa Barbara's beloved community church, a theologian, a human rights activist, advocate, a story listener, which I love, story listener, not storyteller. An adjunct university professor, writer, and author of Making America Great Again, fairy tale, horror story, dream come true. You have your doctorate from the University of South Africa, which is another place that's near and dear to my heart. So someday maybe we'll talk about that, but not today. Anything you want to add to that? Anything you want people to know?
Yeah, well, we have 5 adult kids.
That's a thing.
Yeah. I always hesitate before we've been married for 44 years.
Wow.
Sometimes I hesitate to say that because it sounds like it's an achievement or something. Yes. like we put in the hard work and it was a grind, and yeah. We're still at it, it's just
yeah. But that's no small thing. 44 years of marriage, and you still like each other, and you love each other, and it's beautiful.
Do very much so.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, more than ever, actually.
So good. Well, we're going to talk for a bit here about our image of God and how we see God and how that affects how we see one another and all the implications of that. And then you're going to lead us in a practice, which I'm super excited for. But I thought maybe we just start with maybe your story, how your image of God was formed, maybe early in life, what was important for you in forming that image of God, how you saw God, and just how that's changed, if that has changed for you, how that's changed over the years.
Wow, that's interesting, because I actually wrote a song about my earliest image of God. The name of the song is I Saw His Hand, because when I was, maybe 4 years old, my mom had this kid's Bible-like book, and the picture, when you open it up, the first picture is Genesis. The text is Genesis, and she would read it to me. But there's a picture there of this giant hand coming out of the sky, and you don't see a body or anything. It's just a hand. And so that was my earliest image, and it has come in and out of my life. As part of my overall life experience, this hand is there. Yeah.
So what for you, as you saw that hand, what came to mind? Because to me, I could either think that would be terrifying or
Yeah.
that would be comforting and say lots of beautiful things. So I wonder how you experienced that.
I think that for me at that point in life, it just communicated largeness, just,
Mm,
I mean, it was this hand coming down out of heaven, I guess you could say, towards earth, and you could see the whole earth.
mm,
And so it was enormous. And so that's my initial idea, as the enormity of
mm,
it all.
mhm. Yeah, very big God, very big God. And so over the years, as that has remained with you, what else has sort of formed your theology, what you believe about God, how you see God, how you see God seeing us, maybe?
I wrote that song 30 years ago. I saw his hand. I am not androcentric as I once was. I probably would have titled it "I Saw Your
Mm.
Hand,"
Ah.
rather than his hand, because I think that the androcentric impression of deity is actually, in many ways, it's harmful,
Mm.
and it can be harmful.
Mhm. I'd love for you to say more about that. Mm.
Yeah, there's this underlying presumption of the maleness of God, and it overrides basically just about any other aspects of of how we, as people, and generally as I would say, wherever there are monotheistic societies, I think there is a presumption of maleness, and it quietly undergirds patriarchy,
Mm.
male domination, and it also occludes the fully dimensional God that I prefer to relate to, trans any category. Yeah.
Mm. And how did that, were there moments or people or encounters, like what helped open that space up for you?
Curiosity.
Mm.
I always had questions about the faith that I subscribed to, from the beginning. When I was younger, I was in a Black church experience, and I even questioned aspects of the way that we did things. But then as I got older and my life became more diverse, particularly religiously diverse in terms of other Christians who are not Black, it raised a lot of questions for me. There were questions that never came across my desk when I was only in the Black church, and there was a
Mm.
whole field of new questions like, why, what does the Second Amendment have to do with my faith? But that was a big deal when I
Mm.
started encountering most of the figures in the white church that I met in my late teens and into adulthood.
So you ran into a whole set of new questions that raised questions for you.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And so you're a pastor, so I wonder, of a very diverse church, which I hope I get to visit whenever I get to Santa Barbara. But um, I'm curious how how that's influenced your pastoring.
how the community has, or how my uh,
Your
what
view
are you
of
thinking?
your view of God and the multidimensionality, the fullness of God, and
Yeah.
communicating that, maybe inviting people into that.
You know, I am blessed to be part of such an amazing community. I think we generate each other.
Mm.
I, you know, I hear from our guest speakers, what a great community you've created, David. And I don't feel like I created it so much as I gave space for it, but we
Mm.
created each other. And, we've been attracted to each other. We just, and we love each other. We're getting
Mm.
closer. Yeah.
That's beautiful. So I think about you came into this with it sounds like a very male version of God, and I did too. Um, Honestly, one of the things that sort of helped me begin to imagine something different was Paul Young's novel, The Shack, where
Mm,
he gave us a God who's not only female but Black and
right, right.
then Native American. What?
Yeah, yeah.
um, and that started to open my imagination to begin to see um, a God who is not strictly male and not strictly white. Um, And so I wonder in your own life, in your own experience, how seeing a God that's not strictly male and not of a specific color um, has impacted you, has influenced your journey, your relationship with God and your relationship with other people.
Look, again, curiosity has had a big place in my quest to understand um, who I am and what we are about.
Mm.
I am a liberation theologian, which means someone asked me, what is liberation theology? And I said, it's the opposite of domination theology.
Mm.
Um, Domination theology is basically mainstream theology for the most part. Um, it's very Western. It flows alongside imperialism, capitalism, enslavement, dispossession of indigenous peoples. So to think differently, it has helped me to, first of all, read the Latin. I read Latin American theologians, because see,
Mm.
and basically they're all Catholic, right?
Mhm.
Because the Catholic Church, being a European and Western entity, could not see the indigenous peoples in Latin America, could not, just saw them, as constituents,
Mm.
but did not appreciate their struggle. In fact, in the early '60s, the Vatican Council determined that the biggest need in the Americas for the Catholic Church was more priests. Well, the priests were saying,
Mm.
I don't think that's the problem. Our
Mm.
problem is poverty. Our
Mm.
problem is disenfranchisement and invisibility. So they wrote about that, and I studied them. And then I also studied James Cone, a Black liberation theologian, and my appetite grew. So I started
Mm.
reading the theologies, the stories of the Ainu and Buraku people in Japan, the indigenous people of Japan, and the Dalit.
Mm.
I studied Dalit theology, the dispossessed people in India,
Mm.
and there are all kinds of course, indigenous authors here, like Richard Twist, um, that are, from, their voices are North American. So to me, legitimate and worthwhile Christianity always emerges from the margins. It's rarely the people that capture the attention of the powerful, the book publishers, the media scions, and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's easy, and I don't want to read into like the questions that started showing up on your desk as a pastor around why does the Second Amendment matter? But for me, I think some of the awakening that's happening is, I think our American church evangelicalism, I'm going to speak in really broad brush terms that are way overly generalized. So just caveat on that. But our faith becomes very individualistic and very much about me and not so much about, and then it becomes about privilege, right? If it's particularly if I'm white and I don't even realize my own privilege. And I begin to see that it starts to become clear pretty quickly that Jesus was always moving toward the margins, right? That's who he was. He was on the margin. He lived from the margins. We hear all the stories we hear about him are largely people on the margins. And so the social implications of that start to become big really quickly, in terms of how we live this out. And I'm just thinking, even in terms of many of the conversations we've had on this topic, I've had with other people, they've been beautiful conversations, but they've been much more individualistic in terms of how does this affect sort of my faith and the healing of my heart. And there's a big conversation to be had about what about the healing of how I relate to other human beings and who I am in relationship to other human beings. So am I getting close? Am I starting to to see some of what you have seen in liberation theology? And it becomes much more about freedom.
Well, the thing is that there are certain things that people on the margins see that those who are not on the margins either don't see or pretend that they don't see, especially when it comes to structural oppression. Those who are not on the margins do not see structural oppression when they're actually participating in it. And it's almost like, what are you saying? What are you pointing out? What are you complaining about? I don't see what you're getting at. And I mean, I had a conversation like that a couple of days ago. I raised a question on Facebook. What's the most absurd thing that you have seen in recent history? And so there were many, many things that people listed, but there was one person, I guess, wanted to temper the conversation, I don't know, with the veneer of being a moderate, being, saying that, I'm not, I didn't like Trump, but I don't like Biden even more, and that kind of thing. And I replied, you would have to be insulated with whiteness to not realize the clear and present danger that Donald Trump is to Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And so he replied that he didn't think that, because I had said basically white supremacy is the thing that's dividing us, because he had pointed up the division in our society. And he didn't see that. He didn't recognize that. And then he told me that, he said, you're not going to make me feel ashamed for being white, which had nothing to do with, you don't have to be white to be insulated with whiteness. And so I just said, listen, I'm not trying to make you feel ashamed. That God don't make no trash. And he thanked me, and he said, and I want justice for Black people, even though I have no idea what that looks like. And that is the rub right there. He admitted that he had no idea what it looks like, when in fact, we study this every day. This is our life. This is it's in the water in Western society. And so for him to say he had no idea what it looks like, it's very dismissive of something that's a heavy burden, that our society is not going to emerge into a better society until it faces it, until it deals with what he has no idea of. If he wants to have a conversation about that, we could go on for hours about what it looks like.
Yes. Yeah, and often as a white person, I will say we're in the water, right? We can't see the water because we're in the water, and it's our water. and,
Right.
and so for me, what's been helping is becoming a learner and a listener. And listening to people like you and some other folks that forming relationship with and following and reading, and it's a work of moving away from our separateness to our connection, to our oneness. And I know that sense of connection and oneness and family is important to you. I think it's part of who you are. So I wonder, how do we do it? How do we begin to see God and see ourselves in a way that brings us together versus drives us apart, because we're living in these horrible divides and fragments.
Yeah, you're reminding me of what that gentleman stated on on my Facebook when he says, I want justice for Black people. I have no idea what it looks like. And until that is dealt with, there cannot be a true oneness. When and the same thing applies for gender. If men are going to go ahead and keep pretending that that patriarchy is not a thing, that get over it, tell all the women to just get over it. As long as that's what's being projected, there will be no union between the genders. We will not be optimal in our relationships. It just just can't be until there is a recognition. And I think of something that I read yesterday. It said, I've read that being a woman means whispering WTF to yourself daily. And the reply was, okay, first of all, I didn't know we were supposed to be whispering it. And I love that. I love that. I think people who are being disrecognized or not recognized need to take up space, need to step up and be their full selves, whether, whoever it is on the margins.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And to not be so easily offended or self-protective, or all the things that comes from, the fear that comes from, so many places that comes from. But and to me, it seems there's something about being able to see the image of God in one another. Like, if you tell me if I'm wrong, but if I'm acclimated to this white male God, and I'm looking, for example, at a Black woman that I may dearly love, and yet there's some way that maybe I'm not fully seeing the image of God in her. And I think that makes a difference.
You use the term white male God. I think she might have coined the term, but my friend Christina Cleveland, she uses that as one word, white male God.
Well, I've started following her, and she's helping me a lot. She doesn't know it, but I'm stalking her. and she's helping me a lot. So maybe I picked that up from her. But yeah,
Yeah,
to see God as a Black woman, that's that feels like liberation to me.
yeah, it is. And, particularly for Christina, who I haven't had a conversation with in a while, even though we've got her scheduled to speak later this year.
Mm.
Um, she did her PhD work here in Santa Barbara and
Ah,
attended our church. And so I've seen her from when she was in her, her 20s until now, and watched her transform. Um, and, for her, she writes about this, so I'm not divulging anything, but she suffers from an eating disorder, and
mm,
um, and so as part of recovery, part of a recovery group for that. And she said that in recovery, her higher power had to be something she could relate to intimately. She could
mm,
not relate to a white male God.
yeah.
And so this is why it's so important for us to expand our notions of God.
Yes. Yeah. I was this is as I've been thinking about the time we were going to spend today. I was remembering a time being in India, and we were staying in Mumbai with a group of nuns from the Order of Bridget, which I guess is maybe a Scandinavian order. I don't know, but there were all these lovely Indian nuns, and every picture of Jesus was this Scandinavian looking Jesus. And I just thought, how do they relate? How do they connect to this very white Nordic Jesus? We don't even, yeah, there's so much we don't even think about.
When I first came here uh, to lead the church, which has a completely different constituency now because it's been almost 4 decades. I was in my 20s, and there was a picture in the church of that Jesus you're talking about. There was a print of very well done and framed inside the building. And I remember seeing an older guy, Black guy later, who had visited. And he said, "Now I can't go to your church, not with that big picture of Euro Jesus." And and at the time, yeah, I hadn't even been thinking about it, but
Mm,
I then, it's like my eyes were opened right away, that I had been conditioned my whole life to think of a standard that wasn't actually a standard.
mhm. Yeah, it's when it's the water, right? We don't know until something or someone awakens us. It seems to me in the times we live in, there are nothing but invitations coming for us to wake up to some of this.
I agree. I agree. I mean, it was a big wake up call to much of our society when Officer Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd on a Minneapolis street. That was a turning point for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, we, yes, yes. I just think for me, it's hard as a privileged white person sometimes to see that it's really like, oh, I know it's bad. No, no, no. It's worse than it's however bad I think it is, it's worse than that. And that's what these invitations keep saying to me, like, no, 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 you have to wake up because there's more going on than you know.
There's so much, and once you start peeling the layers back, you start seeing more, and more. It's like, when someone asks about, manifest destiny, was it really that bad? Maybe now we have more Christians because of manifest destiny and imperialism and
Mm,
things like that. But look at the kind of Christianity that has been created. It's patriarchal and it's imperial. And so how is that a plus? And people will say, well, you know, we get to evangelize, we get to, and they don't really, I mean, that's so, I mean, there's so much dissonance in that, because you look at, for instance, the invasion of Mexico in the 19th century under President James K. Polk, actually going as far as Mexico City, conquering Mexico, and then eventually having a treaty where Mexico cedes what we know as California, you know, Arizona, New Mexico, to the United States, because of the United States invading Mexico in the same way the United States invaded Iraq, you know, or, you know, under false pretenses, taking over. And the reasons for this was to create more slave states, because the US economy was so dependent on free labor. And so they were going to, you know, create more states. The intention was, well, obviously we know the Civil War would take place after Polk. And so they never realized their dreams of creating more slave states. I mean, people, we don't even know our history from them. I didn't know until I was like 40 years old that one of the reasons Hawaii was not included as a state after the US invaded Hawaii at first was because of the big debate on whether Hawaii should be a slave state because of its location underneath the, you know, the parallel, the Mason-Dixon line, if you will, if you had extended out that far. And so here you have a you know, a conquest of Mexican territory, which was home for so many different indigenous people, and even more indigenous people because of the Trail of Tears and things like that, you know, starting with Andrew Jackson forcing indigenous people onto land that was not home to them. And so it's so convoluted how many people, marginalized people are affected by the imposition of a story, a narrative that we still haven't let go of. This, you know, this narrative of white rightness and white supremacy and white Christianity.
Yeah. So for those who are listening, for those who are still listening, who haven't stopped listening, thank you that you're still listening. I'm curious, how do we begin to see what we don't see? How do we begin to see the image of God in people and places that we're not seeing it?
Yeah, I you know, God is in all of us.
Yeah.
We're the image bearers, to use a popular term, you know, Imago Dei and all that kind of thing. God is in everybody. And so I think that we need to look for God in everybody. And there's a greater intensity of manifestation in those who are on the margins. I was at a retreat a few years ago at this center in Santa Barbara, a retreat place. And I was there, you know, for meditation and prayer. And I had to sign up and pay to be a part of this event. And I noticed on Saturday morning, these women, these Latinas who were, you know, serving. They were bringing our breakfast. They were, you know, some of them were tending the property and that kind of thing. And I had a light bulb moment. These are the, you know, I'm trying to be who they are already. You know, these are women who have given up time on their weekend because they have to work. They have kids like I have kids, you know, and yet here I am basically living in a moment of luxury, because that's what it was, trying to become more spiritual. And I'm being served by the people that I should be serving. And so I left there and I just thought, what a sham. What a sham this is. All of us are trying to be devout, you know, and how are you going to be devout when you're walking past people and invisibilizing them?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So as we begin, seems to me it requires intention, right? I'm going to be intentional. God is in everyone. Same God in everyone. Therefore, that God doesn't look like me because same God in everyone. That God loves the margins. And so it's beginning to reorient my life. Like, how do I not be the privileged person in the room, right? How do I not be that person?
And a lot of this, and for me, I have to credit the community that I am around, that I'm a part of, because I've been challenged by my community to have a bigger heart. And I'm grateful for this experience. I don't think everybody lives in a community like that. I think that sometimes people's communities are unwittingly bigoted and closed. And we've heard that saying that if you look at the 5 people in your life that you're closest to, you can see a mirror of yourself. And so there has to be a pulling away, a willingness to disturb those people if those people are not helping your heart to grow and become more inclusive.
That's beautiful and super challenging. So thank you for that. That's good. I have maybe one more question, but and then I'd love for you to just lead us in a practice. But when we were at St. Stephen's together, because I'm a new student in the master's program there, and you were teaching the class, I heard you say at least twice, I'm hopeful but not optimistic. So I wonder what is giving you hope.
Yeah, that was, I think, a quote from James Baldwin, actually. Hopeful but not optimistic, because I think I think hope is not the ephemeral thing that we make of it. Hope is not just like the dream you had last night. It's not cotton candy. Hope is powerful. It's actually more powerful than optimism, because optimism is hoping that things get better. Hope is deciding that they will be better, that things are going to change. And so when I say I have hope, it's because I'm engaged with people. Yeah, it's definitely not in isolation. It's because I'm engaged with people who they don't grab headlines for the most part, but they're very real people who are doing things to save the planet, to save our species. These people are working hard. Some of them are people of faith, some of them are not. Very often the people who are not people of faith kind of burn out. I don't want to judge that too harshly, because they're doing the work that a lot of people who supposedly are of faith are resisting. But these are people who are doing good in the world. They care. I mean, their hearts are just overflowing with compassion. And they drive down to the border. They join with Muslims to pray for the folks at the border. You just can't. I'm thinking of specific individuals right now who do not subscribe to any faith tradition, but they represent the heart of Jesus so much that it hurts. It's just amazing to have people like that in your life.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and so maybe there's an invitation that there is for me anyway, to intentionally get myself around people like that, because people like that, people like you, people like Christina Cleveland and other friends that I have, they help me wake up. And that's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing. So I just want to open space for you to lead us as you feel led in a practice.
All right.
I'm just going to follow along.
What, like maybe 3 minutes or
whatever. This
okay.
is your space. You do whatever you want, David.
Well, let's quiet ourselves. And the important thing throughout is to let your mind be where your body is, because your mind wants to be a lot of places. Begin to feel your breath. As you inhale, feel the coolness. As you exhale, feel the warmth. And breathe in hope. And breathe in possibility. This weekend, we celebrate resurrection. Breathe in re-emergence, refashioning. Reshaping. Just keep feeling your breath. Make sure your mind is staying with your body. Know that with your mind connected with your body, that it does not have the power to mind-splain everything. It keeps you in the moment, keeps you in reality. And only when you are in reality can you see the beauty, the effusive, immeasurable beauty that's in your world right now. This is your most wonderful moment. Go ahead and feel your breath and your entire body. As we stop this time, I'm thinking of, I don't know where we got it from, but what we do sometimes here locally is someone will ask, what time is it? And the answer is now.
Mm-hmm.
And someone might ask, where are you? I'm here. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, David, so much. Those contemplative moments and practices and connections are so important on this journey, I think. It opens us up to see what's true that we haven't seen. So thank you for that. So if people want to connect with you, I want to encourage people to connect with you. What are the best ways for people to do that?
You can find my daily blog on my website, davidinmore.com. That's probably I mean, I'm on all the socials and all of that too, but the most direct path, I suppose, is the blog and their comment sections and things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that you write so consistently for us. So thank you. Thank you for doing that.
And thank you for reading, and and thank you anybody else who wants to read basically what is my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll be story listeners with you and we'll be changed for the better for it. So
Yeah.
again, thank you, David. And thanks to all of you for joining us for this time. And together we bless you to live deeply rooted in the love of God.